Okay, hi everyone. First I'm going to have the panelists just quickly introduce themselves and then we'll get started. Do you want to start with you, Kristin?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kristin Ling. I'm the head of customer activation and engagement at MassMutual. I'll pass it to my colleague.
On? Okay. Hi, my name is Ling. I head up the marketing analytics and customer insights as well as MarTech group here at MassMutual. I am a veteran of Vista. I was there for about 8 years, and I'm also a veteran at Liberty Mutual. I've been with MassMutual for about 4 years.
Excellent. Hi, I'm Lydia Wagner. I run the brand strategy and integrated marketing group at SmileDirectClub. We are a teledentistry provider of clear aligners for teeth straightening, and we operate as a direct-to-consumer brand and also have a large CPG presence around oral care at major retailers, and we have a global presence as well. So thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
Hey everyone, I'm Brian. Is that on? Right now, good. I'm Brian Costello. I'm the head of demand generation in the performance-driven marketing group at General Motors. In my best Massachusetts accent, we make cars.
Yes.
And my name is Will Burghes. I'm the head of marketing science at Argonaut. We're a full-service creative agency with offices in San Francisco and New York. So my first question I want to ask Kristin is, present company excluded. I've worked in the finance category for a long time, and there's a lot of sameness, I think, in the communications that we see. And I'm really interested in understanding how you use data to make yourself stand out in the category.
No, thank you for asking the question. So about a year and a half ago, we issued an RFP looking for a new creative agency of record. And what was interesting about the RFP is we didn't issue a creative RFP. We actually issued a strategic one. And the challenge to the teams that we sent it to was, how do we stand out in a sea of sameness? You know, where there are just these category tropes that you see throughout the industry. Like for a while there, it was, you know, people were like, you know, climbing Kathmandu, or they're like walking on a nice beach, or for a time there were beekeepers everywhere. Like everyone's retiring and becoming a beekeeper. And so, so we selected Gray, New York, and we selected them because their strategy was so rich, and the data and analytics and the tools that they had to get under the hood of an opportunity for MassMutual to differentiate really made them stood apart. And so we began to explore, and we have work in market right now that's really about how a relationship with this category that we're in doesn't start with a life moment, but with a wake-up call. And so we've been building upon that strategy over time and trying to essentially normalize uncomfortable financial conversations in the household. So I think our funniest work is coming this holiday season. I laugh out loud when I see it. I hope you all do too. I think you will. But anyway, that's we used their kind of rich, I would say, like social listening to uncover the insight that we leveraged.
And where can we see that work? Where should we be keeping our eyes peeled?
Everywhere. So you'll see. So we buy the traditional holiday programs. You know, the movie marathons, the 12 Days of Christmas. Yeah, Hallmark Channel, all of those places. It'll be, and of course, it'll be on our social as well.
Excellent, fantastic. So switching gears a little bit, Lydia, obviously you're in a completely different category, less well-established. Teledentistry, it seems like a much newer vertical. So fewer tropes to contend with, but how do you think about the same problem of bringing data into the insights process?
Yeah, thanks, Will. It's interesting. I was just reflecting on, we have 3 incredibly different categories in this panel, which is really nice. So hopefully we can tie things together and then hear the nuances. So I think, you know, for me, let's just start high level. Clear aligners. First of all, I just want to ask, how many people had braces? How many people want to do that again? Oh, you do? Okay, no, just kidding. Yeah, so we you know, as an industry of clear aligners, we're a fairly new industry, and especially the category that we have created, it's only about 8 years old. So when I think about, you know, at a high level, I think about sizing of category. Why should this category exist? It's about a $2.5 billion category, quickly going to grow to about $6 billion. It's global in nature. And then I think about the other foundations, right? When you come into a category and you're building, you have to think about segmentation. We all have teeth, which is nice. So that sort of means we're all in the market, but are we actually shopping in the market for clear aligners? So, then we think about targeting, who are we going to go after? And it's interesting so far for us, in these few short years, we've found a core customer who is female, about 18 to 30, 35, usually making less than $100,000. And also, that's a customer, not surprisingly, or maybe surprisingly, who's actually straightened their teeth before. So didn't wear that retainer, has some movement, wants to come back. Obviously, as I just asked you all, no one really wants to go back to the years of your life that you spent on braces, so there's a lot of opportunity. So when we think about that targeting strategy, we also think about how that aligns with messaging and the data that we use around messaging. We came into this category really with 3 pillars in mind. The first was access to care. There's a huge portion of the population that simply didn't have access to orthodontic care. So we're sort of catching up and helping them to meet that need. Then we think about convenience. If you think back to your days in braces, you were at the mercy of that orthodontist. They were saying, okay, you're gonna come back next month, and you're gonna come back next month, and that could go on for years and years. So this is a way to really do this from your house in a doctor-directed, credible way. And then I like to think about, for us, we really, like many other brands here, we operate across almost every channel that's out there. And so we, like many others, are very much test and learn. We're constantly iterating and optimizing. We are a performance-based brand. I think we're gonna talk a little bit about our opportunity to move into brand marketing, but we're using that data to really inform the things I just spoke to. Are we finding the right target? Are we finding the people who are in market? Is it all working? One of the other kind of quick case studies that I wanna share with the group is this idea of how we've really used insights in the last year. Like many others, we are at a place where we're trying to find growth. We're trying to move beyond that core customer. And so we really started to think, how do we do that? How do we find new audiences? How do we build something that can matter? And so we really thought about, both a qual and quant approach in terms of building a new offering. And that has led us to a hybrid model that doesn't exist in the marketplace today. That has been announced, it's going to be called Care Plus. And this is a way that you can still start at your local dentist, have that oversight, but again, not be at the mercy of going back all the time, still finding that convenience and that flexibility in the model. So we're really excited to have listened to those insights and to be bringing that to market next year. And obviously we'll learn quite a bit from bringing that in and seeing how it performs.
Fantastic. So from financial services to teledentistry to automotive, Brian, how are you approaching this problem of bringing the enormous amount of data across all of your brands to bear on the creative process?
Yeah, if you think about it, we have in our first-party data, hundreds of millions actually of almost everybody in America is in our first-party database. And so the challenge really is, how do we build a model within this large organization so that we can refactor how we think about data and insights? And so what we've done is we have a group called Performance-Driven Marketing, which is I'm in. It's 5 pillars, and it's an enterprise capability. Again, think about the fact that you've got Cadillac, Buick, GMC, Chevy, and then about 9 or 10 sub-brands, OnStar, people like that, all kind of using the same databases in a way. And so really we factored it around data at the center. So data and the customer, knowing that trust is the most important thing. We have to have the customer be able to trust that their data is safe with us. Part of that is then taking that data and really looking at it and figuring out, okay, how do we bring all these massive amounts of databases together? Because of that privacy issue, right? With all the laws globally, privacy, we have to make sure that we speak to the consumer when they want to be spoken to and build that trust. But then that brings it in to our insights capability. How do we actually talk to the brands and tell them what matters most in marketing? It's a type of person, the people we look at for that organization are not only sort of data experts and insights experts, they're storytellers. And so we've really built out things like CMO scorecards. And one of the things we're working with is each CMO, and across all the organizations, they're looking at the right data and making the right insights that make a difference to the business. And then we've got marketing technology as a core capability now, really a COE around making sure, again, 12 different brands aren't using 12 different marketing technology strategies. And then finally, we look at measurement. really wrapping measurement, advanced analytics and measurement, MMM, MTA, again, finding the right mix. And then my organization manages on the data, the demand generation side. And for me, it's really taking all that stuff and saying, how do I use data to hold media accountable for business results? It sounds like that's what we all do, but at a car brands, that's not what they always did, right? It's brand, 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 and it's really not understanding necessarily how do I drive the business and how can I prove media will drive that business.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue into my next question, which is about measurement. And I want to turn it over to Ling. So we have a lot of conversations at Argonaut with clients who are coming from a position where they do not understand how their brand manifests in value to the bottom line. And they have a really hard time explaining to their CEOs and CFOs how the work that they do really matters. And furthermore, all of them think that they're the only ones who are going through this pain. And so they all want to know if anyone else is experiencing it. And so Ling, I'd love to just hear, how are you kind of figuring out the answers to those problems?
Yeah. It is indeed a hard nut to crack, and it can be painful. Imagine that you made this beautiful, delicious lava chocolate cake, and then you bring it to your business partner, and then basically say, okay, look at my cake, and you don't allow them to taste it. And next time around, you try to build another cake and ask for money, and then they start to second guess you, right? That's essentially what a lot of the companies are facing, right? Because brand marketing activities are mostly upper funnel and sometimes middle funnel. And that can be steps away from where the sales transactions are happening. And that's why a lot of the companies consider brand marketing as a cost center, right? In the morning, the Vista panel talked about how they're starting to bring brand and performance marketing together and measure that more holistically. If you're in the e-commerce direct marketing, I would say you're lucky. Feel free to disagree with me. Our business has huge challenges because one, we sell through intermediaries, right? So that means it elongates the distance between brand activities and the sales transactions even further. Second, we have long sales cycles. You can be looking at anywhere between 6 months to up to 2 years to make a sale. And that makes the correlation of cause and effect very difficult. And the third one is that we don't have the data lineage to connect the end-to-end funnel because we're so heavily leaning into humans to make the sale, right? So then, Will, you might ask me, why are you here, Ling? Go solve your problem. So I'm happy to report that we started to really crack that nut, right? So, and we are actually starting to shift the perception of our executive leadership team from brand marketing being a cost center to a growth driver, right? And last year, we partnered very closely with Kristin's team and our data science team, and we built this successful media mix model, right? And essentially, for the first time in MassMutual's 170 years of history, we were able to quantify the marketing sales attribution toward one of our biggest distribution channels. And that was a big success. And the results were well received by our ELT and the board. They thought that was a sweet cake. And it really, the results really helped them to better understand the brand's role and value within the bigger context of our business operations. And what's more is that we were able to use that insight to drive decisions going forward, how we allocate media investment, and to drive that ROI increases continuously, right? So that's, I think, well, if you, to your question, right? So P&L is the universal language, right? So link your brand value to the P in your company's P&L.
It really is an amazing accomplishment, and I want to come back and ask a little bit more about how you've organized around that later in the session. But first, I want to come back to Lydia and just say, you're coming, I think, from a quite different place. You're a D2C company. I assume that you have performance in your soul, and therefore, how are you approaching these conversations around building a brand?
Yes, and I'm coming to you as the brand strategy leader of a company that is, yes, of course, built on performance marketing. We were built in the heyday of D2C. Not that heyday has gone away, but, you know, sort of in that era, we have club in our name. So, you know, I think even though it's part of our DNA and it has helped us to get to where we are at a transition point. We're pivoting, which I think is a really good thing. And, you know, for us, even though we are tinkerers, we like to understand how things are performing on the day and make changes, we've managed to use our in-house creative prowess, and I just want to give kudos. We have an incredible team who have built really strong, what I call brand codes, distinctive brand assets, if you like the Byron Sharp world. Things like color, things like shapes, things like character, things like audio mnemonic. And I think we've been able to bring those really strong brand elements into the world of performance. So, you know, there's this debate in our industry, which is, how do you bring those two things together? And can it happen in creative? Should it happen in media? I actually think the answer is it's both. It's the power of and. And so for me, I like to think about, I think there's creative opportunity to tell a brand story and to drive action at the same time. And I also think it really matters where you're serving that work and what channel you're in. But I actually think it's really interesting. You can see some case studies from other brands where they've served the same creative execution into different media, and it is performed differently based on that channel. So I think there's a lot of continued experimentation for brands, and especially for us in that shape. We are going to be looking ahead to next year as a way to revitalize and really reshape our brand narrative. Even in the short 8 years that we've been around, we're going to be moving away from a promotional space, I hope, and really into what I call a new master brand territory. And we're looking to bring the new offering that I mentioned earlier to life. We're looking to really bring this premise of control and flexibility to customers. So, you know, I think the one thing I'll say on our side is we have a champion in our CMO in doing this, in setting an objective that isn't necessarily sales-based. And so I think that's been really important in getting this off the ground. So it's going to be about taking a couple of steps forward. It's not a huge leap, but a couple of steps forward into finding that balance. When I think about other brands that do this really well, I love the experiment that Airbnb started in 2020. And you can read almost every week about their success. They're a little bit of an outlier because they basically turned off all performance marketing. But I think this is really backed up by the research of Field and Binet, if anyone's familiar with that, and Mark Ritson. So, you know, I find myself to be a student of that and try to bring in that theory and put it into practice in what we're doing.
Fantastic. And then I think, Brian, you might describe yourself as working for the opposite kind of organization that was a very historic, heavy brand marketer that's now learning to do performance. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You know, obviously GM is billions of dollars in spend every year on media and most of its brand. However, we also have sub-brands, which are really performance brands. If you think about the e-commerce business on accessories and parts, when you think about OnStar, connected services, our fleet business, and all that. And what I learned coming into GM very quickly was they all had brand marketers, right? So including the e-commerce folks. And so when I started talking about this thing called performance marketing, a lot of people ran for the hills because they thought I meant just lower funnel marketing. I did mean lower funnel marketing, but I also meant how does that equal into your brand spend, and how do you build a performance muscle around measurement? How do you build and data, right? And so we had businesses that were not measuring performance, and were not measuring it in a way that allowed them to get more dollars to drive the business. And so my pitch was, I'm really here to just get you more money, right? And for some of these businesses, they're giant businesses, but within GM, they're kind of little businesses. If you think about our fleet business, you know, it's tens of billions of dollars, but to them, it's sort of like, you know, here we are, we're just a little company. And, you know, teaching them how to use media to drive leads and how to score leads and all that, that's just new to them. And so it's taking that, but also at the brand level, it's really understanding how do you understand the insights so that you can segment better. And I think I used this to somebody here. You know, when Chevy loses a customer to Buick or to Cadillac or to GMC, they think about it as a lost customer. But it's not, right? It's within the family. And how do we take that data and really understand that's a really good customer? And oh, by the way, they bought a Chevy for their kid, and now they're buying a Cadillac. We need to understand all that. And so it is performance. And when I think performance, I'm just basically saying, very simply, I'll say it over and over again, but I want to measure so that every piece of your media can prove that something happened. And much like MassMutual, we have the same problem. We don't sell cars, right? 4,200 dealers sell cars, right? And then we have regional dealership groups, and then we have the dealer, right? And so the challenge there is, you know, you've got Tier 1, which is Chevy. You've got Tier 2, which is Chevy Dealers of New England. And you've got Tier 3, which would be Herb Chambers Chevy, something like that. They're all spending money in the same market on the same thing. And half the time they're not talking to each other, right? We need to match all that. And then you've got some dealers who's, you know, they got a brother-in-law who's making ads in Microsoft Paint or something, you know. And so, you know, it's really how do you rationalize and refactor all that? It's a hard problem.
So, Kristin, I want to come back to you and just latch on to something that Ling said earlier, because what you've accomplished is really incredible, and it's clearly very sophisticated work that's happening within your organization. And something that I've experienced in the past is that it's quite hard to get data scientists and marketers to talk to each other, to speak the same language, and I'm really interested in how you've organized yourselves around that problem.
Sure. So about a year and a half ago at this point, MassMutual went through a consolidation of marketing. We had a decentralized team of people that sat with our different lines of business. And, you know, it's inefficient. It's a lot of things that just don't work for a big brand like we are. So the decision was made by the ELT to consolidate the teams under Jen Halloran, who you heard from earlier today. And then within that, there were centers of excellence that were set up. So Ling joined the team as a center of excellence in what she does. I lead essentially the marketing type aspects of the work, so brand integrated, the different media strategy around the brand, and other things. And you heard from Spencer earlier today, who leads our creative unit. And then we have the product COE. And essentially putting these capabilities together, it allowed us to really focus on what we do well deeply. And it gave our teams an opportunity to learn from one another in spaces that are similar, right? And so, you know, when I first started at MassMutual, we had one person who did our brand performance, but what Ling has brought to the party is a huge ecosystem of measurement that gives us so much rich information to make all of the marketing that we do so much stronger. And I, for one, am glad I don't have to talk to data science, and that Ling and her team are here to do that, because they speak a different language than we do. And it's been incredibly helpful to us in the seat that we sit in to have such strong partners here.
Fantastic. So we have a few minutes left. I want to open it up to the audience and see if there's any questions.
I have a question for Lydia specifically. So from transitioning from a D2C business to retail, and traditional consumer packaged goods model, what kind of data did you use to sell the product into the retailers? And then with that said, how do you measure success, especially since some of the metrics in D2C is completely different from CPG?
Yeah, so just for clarity, we're not transitioning. We're still D2C at our core. So our clear aligners are going to continue to operate directly to consumers. And we have augmented our business with a CPG line of oral care. So imagine you're walking the oral care line at Walmart. You're seeing teeth whitening, you're seeing power flossers. And that's a new business for us. It's about 2 years old now, maybe 2.5. The beauty of that business is its lead generation for a D2C brand. Right, so you think about the people, the millions of people walking the aisles of Walmart. Yes, that business it has its own P&L. It's able to stand on its own, but it's also a really powerful lead source. So I think the big transition for us is actually going to be moving from primarily a D2C brand for clear aligners and actually into the professional space. So you going to your local dentist and being able to say, I want to start with SmileDirectClub. Tell me, am I a good candidate? And then being able to work hand in hand with a SmileDirectClub orthodontist or dentist, that's going to be a big transition for us because at our core, we're a D2C brand. So that's starting in the next year ahead, and we've already built a strong partnership with local dentists that's continuing to grow, but that's really what I'm excited for, and that oral care line will continue to exist as a lead source. Thank you for that question.
Any other questions? I've got a mic for you. I've got a mic.
It also relates to Ford. So this is for Brian. Ford just announced that they may sell new cars direct instead of going through dealers because of all the price gouging that's been happening for like the last 18 months. I think you're in a good position if General Motors does it. How would you handle something like that if it went, General Motors said, I'm going to sell direct new cars?
Yeah, that's probably above my pay grade. I don't know if I can answer your mic with the last name and all, but I could tell you that at the core of GM's business is the 4,200 dealer network that's there, right? But I think you have to make it compelling for the dealers to have a profitable business. If you think about it, a dealership gets its most profitable as a business from parts and services, right? Second most is from used cars, and third is from new cars. As you move into the EV world, there are no oil changes, right? And so they have to figure out, I think, how do you make it profitable for that business? And then secondly, you're right, the Cadillac Lyriq is sold out, right? No person walked into a dealership, right? They might have, but they primarily put some money down online. The EV Hummer has got a huge waiting list, right? And so I think we're working through that. There's a group that's working on what's called the future of retail, and I don't think we've made any decisions on it.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I was most recently at Staples. You sell a pen, right? It's about as short a life cycle as you can get. Yeah, okay. So, I think there's a lot to learn from marketers and from brands that are definitely more direct and have that very short life cycle, because the measurement has to be quicker and you have to think faster in a lot of ways, right? I think about how segmentation works. When I did it at Staples, it's a lot different, to your point, than a Cadillac, right? But all the brands that I work with, they are direct and they are definitely slower, but I think what we can learn from these brands is agility. For my purposes, it's just slow. Everything takes a long time, right? There's a lot of people involved. There's 168,000 employees. And there seems to be a lot of layers, and part of the reason this group on my side was built, of all the directors on the team that I work on, they're all outsiders. From Walmart, Apple, me from Staples, gentlemen from Mondelez, right? And so that's how we're approaching it, right? You have to be more nimble, you have to be faster, and I think I admire those brands primarily because they can drive us to be better even in a slower life cycle. There's no reason to say you can't be fast just because the customer's slow.
I really greatly admire fast food chains, McDonald's, KFC, and then our New Balance friends who were up here earlier, the way that they tap into culture. They're sort of able to move at the speed of culture. Our category is not at all in that. But I think there's opportunity. And I think, for us, one of the ways we're experimenting is by stepping into things like gaming and trying to reach, teen case starts or the highest case starts in the industry. So I think, there is a lot to learn. And the beauty of our business is actually we have a, $20 teeth whitening product where we can learn from that fast moving piece. But I think for us, my goal is to try to connect us more into culture.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just add a little bit, my perspective, right? So, because brand is really just defining who you are, right? So when I think about this, like within the context of MassMutual, right? So who are we? What are our strengths? And where do we want to grow, right? So the marketing, whether that's the brand marketing or B2B marketing or, all the activities we do need to ladder up to the overall business strategy and objectives, right? So that's kind of how I think about it. We do look at, we look across, right? We look, what is this direct marketing firm doing? What is this, other B2B2C, in our industry, outside of our industry, what are they doing? I think we need to come back and to the core and say, hey, like, who are we and who do we want to grow into, right? And where do we see ourselves in, 10, 20 years? And what are some of the offenses we need to do? What are some of the defenses we need to do, right? And from an analytics standpoint, we spend a lot of time thinking about customer analytics, right? We start to, introduce the outside-in view into the business, right? Not just look at inside out. So from that angle, we want to pay attention to something like customer lifetime value, right? When you say fast and cheaper, lower price, right? So like, what are some of these customers in the beginning of their career and the beginning of their wealth accumulation process? What are their needs? What do we offer? And what are the other things that we can think about and branch out so that we can bring them into a runway that's there for the long term, right? So I think that's, maybe I'm not directly answering your question, but this is kind of the angle I would like to think about for us.
I was just going to say, I would love to have the challenge of just selling a pen, but within our team and some of the people who are here today, for us, when we think about a digital marketing journey, we have been testing, I don't know how many iterations of funnels with different types of content from, top to bottom funnel, conversion stuff. And we're learning something all the time. So one of the insights that came, we were, just looking at, the top lead form fill. Like, what was the piece of content that drove the top lead form fill? And then we found out it was a piece of affinity content. It was an advisor who was giving back to the homeless in the community. So I think we try to be agile because we took that insight and said, I'm looking at you, Josh, let's put a bunch of affinity content in the top of the funnel and see if that moves people faster to consideration. So while our cycle is longer, we're testing lengths of journeys, the types of content that we serve up at different points of the journey. And we're learning something all the time, but I think the point of agility and something we can learn from those brands that, they're selling dish pods, it's probably that agility. And we try to do that, even though we have a much longer cycle in our business.
I think that's all we have time for. Is that right? Yeah. Well, thank you to the panelists. Thank you to Kristin and MassMutual for opening this magnificent space to us.